Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Grant Cunningham, and welcome to Training Talk right here on Personal Defense Network. This is a show where we talk about you, about your life, and how to protect it. In the next hour, we're going to we're going to explore how you can train and prepare and equip yourself to face your own worst case scenario and keep you and your family safe from harm. Now, we don't do religion or politics on this show. You're not going to hear fringe commentary or crazy conspiracy theories. No tinfoil hat stuff. I just look like I wear a tinfoil hat. I don't really. Just reliable information that you can use to keep you and your family safe. And I'm going to ask you a favor. If you enjoy the show, if you get something out of it, would you please share this with your friends and your family and your coworkers and your neighbors and the people in your sewing circle and church committee and all that kind of stuff? Share this with them. I would consider it a personal honor if you would. And I'm sure that they'd appreciate that you thought enough about them to share the show as well. So thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the show, welcome. I hope you get something out of it. And we're here the first and third Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. So if this is your first time, that's the schedule. And if you're returning, hey, thanks for coming back and once again spending some time with us tonight to talk about personal defense and family safety and all that other kind of stuff. Lots of things going on in the news right now. If you follow the devastating fires down in California, killed a whole bunch of people, destroyed tens of thousands, I guess now, homes, destroyed a bunch of wineries in one of the most important winemaking regions in the United States. And of course, Oregon is, second only to California in terms of the importance to the wine business. Just remember that. But lots of damage, lots of destruction down there. Lots of people having to flee their homes. A lot of them, unfortunately, not prepared for it. So there are lots of articles, lots of retrospectives online that you can look at in terms of what people wish they did, what worked well, what didn't for the wildfire preparedness down there. And you should certainly avail yourself of those. I've been sharing some of those on Facebook. And I'm sure you're probably going to see some of that on PDN here as well. In other news, there, I'm going to share this with you and take a little bit of a tangent. Excuse me. But a Minnesota man in fertile Minnesota, I don't know where that is in Minnesota, but northwestern Minnesota, fell there, a 51-year-old man, apparently lives next to a small airport. And he started shooting at planes flying over his property. And apparently he had called the FAA and complained about airplanes flying over his property. Apparently he wasn't aware they lived next to an airport or something. I don't know. But he started lobbing rounds at the planes that were taking off and landing. And they finally arrested him on charges of attempted murder. But he said that he told the FAA that he would be forced to use lethal force if he were, if he felt threatened by the airplanes. I don't know how you feel threatened by a Cessna, 3,000 feet, but apparently he decided to start lobbing rounds at them. And I mention this because obviously, first of all, a firearm is not an appropriate tool to use when you're tired, tired of the noise above your house. And I think we all know that. I would shudder if somebody doesn't know that. I think we all understand that. But I think this points out that some people are sometimes very cavalier with their use of firearms. And it's up to the rest of us to train and to teach these people and to police our own. And I've said this many times, if we don't police our own, somebody else will do it for us, and we probably won't like the result. And so I bring this up because in most of the parts of the country right now, the hunting season has started. And this doesn't really have a whole lot to do with personal defense, but I think it's important from the standpoint of getting our heads around the idea of firearm safety. If you're going out hunting this year, we see every year quite a few accidents, a few deaths every year from hunters that either shoot at something that they didn't identify, or shot and the bullet went someplace that they didn't anticipate it going and ends up hurting or killing someone. And we talk very often, and you can find a number of videos here on Personal Defense Network about firearm safety. And we talked about three specific rules, and they vary a little bit depending upon who you talk to in terms of the wording. But we talk about, of course, always keeping the muzzle pointed in a generally safe direction. We talk about always keeping your finger outside of the trigger guard unless you're actually shooting. And a third one, which sort of encompasses all of those other safety rules that we see on the posters, with the 15 or 16,000 safety rules on them. And the one that encompasses all of that is understanding that you have in your hands a device that, if you use inappropriately or negligently or recklessly, can kill someone. And if you're going out hunting, I want you to keep especially that third rule in mind, that you need to be aware not only of course of the target at which you're shooting at. I think that goes without saying. Knowing what you're shooting at, making sure that it is in fact a game animal, but just as importantly, knowing where your bullet's going to land and what it's going to touch along the way. If you're facing that shot with the magnificent buck silhouetted up on the ridge, and you're looking at it and going, wow, this is a beautiful shot. What a wonderful trophy. If you can't see the other side of the ridge and you can't see where your bullet's going to land, how about passing that shot up? We every year have houses get hit. I live in a forested area. My own house has been hit. And we see this all the time because people don't understand where their bullet's going to land, and they don't understand what's all the things that'll hit on the way. Pass up that shot. I've passed up quite a few shots like that. And in fact, as recently as the spring when I was out hunting, I passed up more than one shot where the animal was up on a little ridge, and I really couldn't tell if it was a safe shot or not. The trophy isn't worth it. The venison, as much as I like venison, the venison isn't worth it. Make sure that you understand that you're in control of a device that, if you don't use properly, might kill somebody else. And like I said, this is not specifically self-defense related. Of course, it relates directly to the safe handling of firearms in self-defense and in training. But let's stay safe out there while we're engaged in hunting as well. Remember, the rules are just as important out in the forest or in the desert as they are at your local indoor range. All right, enough of that. Tonight, tonight's topic came up because I saw somebody had posted a video or shared a video on Facebook a number of days ago. And it was a video that a fellow had made, and he's an older gentleman, older than I am, at least. And he had made it for his daughter and his son-in-law, and apparently he had given them several firearms. I don't know if it was a wedding gift or what, but the idea was, here are some firearms because you need to keep yourself safe. That's great. But he made a video teaching them how to use their firearms, because the two kids apparently really didn't know anything about firearms. These were the first guns that they had ever owned. They were not enthusiasts, but this guy was a great enthusiast, and he was making this video to show them what to do. And he had on his gun belt and everything. He was showing him how to do the fast draw, and he said something very odd it was certainly odd to me. It will probably sound odd to you as well. But he said, he's starting to draw the gun and showing him how to do the quick draw and everything in case they had to take care of a bad guy. And he had his finger on the trigger as he drew the gun, and he stopped. And he says, these fancy schools, they'll tell you to stick your finger straight out so you don't accidentally trigger a shot. But that's only important if you're a squirrel. If you're not a squirrel, you don't have to worry about it. I've never had to worry about it. And he goes on and demonstrates his fast draw and all this sort of thing. And it occurred to me that sometimes we don't pay a lot of attention to making sure that the people who are new to the idea of self-defense and new to the idea of defensive shooting and new to the idea of a defensive firearm, sometimes we don't pay as much of attention, perhaps, to getting them started on the right foot as maybe we should. And certainly here on Training Talk, we tend to have guests on who and discuss more high level topics, certainly above the beginner level. And I thought it was important to take a step back and let's start out for the people who might be new to this. Maybe you're tuning in because you just got your first defensive firearm. Maybe you're tuning in because somebody at your office has asked you about a defensive firearm and you want to give them the best information you can. So I thought it was a good time to start talking about what we tell newbies, the people who are new to this whole idea of defensive self-reliance. And so as I'm thinking about all the people that I know who I think would do a really good job with this talking, one person just sort of sprung right up to mind, and that's Clint Macro at Trigger Pressers Union. And the reason Clint's name popped to mind is because I know that he has very regular contact, gets to have regular contact with new shooters, and has a lot of experience teaching new shooters and bringing them into the fold. I don't see all that many brand new shooters these days. And so I wanted to get his perspective on it. And so welcome back to the show, Clint.
Well, thanks for having me, Grant. I appreciate it. It's always good to be on the show.
Well, it's always great to have you because, of course, Clint has absolutely the best background of any guest that I have there in his recording studio.
It's actually like one of those things at Walmart. It's a screen I pull down.
Yeah, this is just a very elaborate green screen.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to get one of the. I could really use one of those.
There's a market for that. Maybe I just thought of a new business venture.
There you go. Anyhow, so well, thanks for coming back on and agreeing to talk about this topic. And I know that you've been teaching for a long time, and that you've had the privilege of starting off a lot of new shooters in this. And so I definitely want to get your perspective on this.
Sure. I mean, not only do I get to work with a lot of new shooters, but I train a lot of basic instructors, and I stay in contact with them, and I get to kind of share some of the experiences that they have with a lot of their new shooters too. So it's definitely a different animal when you're talking about someone brand new. And we're often dealing with, there's always a backstory to why they decided to get the firearm. Some want to do it because they think it's cool. Some have had a really traumatic event that has led them to that decision. And, you get some folks that have been around guns a long time, and the pistol's just like, oh, okay, well, this is, they can take what they know from the rifle and hunting and kind of apply it to the pistols, but especially with basic safety. But then you may have someone that's been against guns their whole life, and then they've had a traumatic event and they've realized that, the gun is the great equalizer, and they try to overcome those inhibitions. And it's a real different type of clientele when you're working with that individual as well.
Well, as we were talking before the show, I think there are really three categories of people that we're going to be talking about tonight. And I think there are those people who maybe haven't yet really made the decision that they want a defensive firearm, that they're still exploring that. There are people, I think, that have decided to buy a gun, but haven't really made the choice, the specific choice yet. And then there are those who I think have just purchased a gun and now need to know what to do with it. They need it. So let's start with the people who haven't yet decided that they really want a defensive firearm. And you sort of alluded to this. There are some people who are, in fact, just anti-gun and maybe have come to the realization that the police aren't always there, and you have those who are maybe scared of them for some reason. So you've got this person who says, I'm really not sure about this whole gun thing. I want to learn more about it. Where do you start with this, and particularly where do you start with a person who maybe has that that emotional issue going on?
Yeah, I really try to find out, get to the bottom of what their goals are ultimately. What is your goal with this? Why, try to get the motivation. Why exactly is there something that led you to this? And that's kind of touchy sometimes to get to, but if I know that, it helps me help them maybe a little more efficiently. But, oftentimes some folks will want to get the gun just because they want to have one in the house. Some want to carry it around with them all the time. And then there's other folks that want to have it in the house, but would never, ever carry it. And there's other folks that want to carry it and have it on them when they go to the shower. And you have to let them realize that's probably not something that they're going to realistically be able to do. And then you have other folks that are really looking for other answers besides the gun. And they've realized, for whatever led them to that decision, that the gun is going to be the best choice for them, but they still don't want to do the gun because, for whatever reason, because of fear, inhibitions, years of people telling them that it's a dangerous item, what have you. So really, I like to find out what their motivation is first, and then get their goals, have them speak their goals. And then I try to come up with a plan. I usually will meet up with someone brand new, just for maybe an hour, real quick, just to talk to them. We won't even really do any shooting. I might give them like a safety card or something like that from the National Rifle Association, just so they have a little bit of information that at the very least, if they read it, they won't hurt themselves with a firearm. But I really like to just kind of interview them and vet them and find out what their goals are. And then we go from there. Some folks move quickly, or, more quickly than others. Quicklier. I almost made up a new word there. Some folks will want to train faster, and other folks, you really need to just kind of get their toe wet and then get their foot in. And then there's other folks where it's probably best to just have them leap into the water and have them start kicking to swim.
Do you ever encounter that person? And I know in some fields where I've been a newbie, where somebody has asked me what my goals are, and sometimes it's a little embarrassing because you're not sure if what you're going to say is going to be seen as a valid goal in their eyes. Do you have those people who sort of really don't want to talk about this goal thing because maybe they're afraid of what you might say?
It's been my experience in a class setting. Yes. If they're in a room with other people, if I get an opportunity to sit down with them one-on-one privately, they usually will just tell me everything that they're thinking. So far, that's been my experience. I've been doing one-on-one training more over the last maybe year and a half. In the classroom setting, though, you're absolutely right. People don't want to speak around other folks because this is a real intimate thing. We're talking about using some type of tool to defend your loved ones and yourself, and that's very private for many people. So yeah, I would agree with that in a group setting, certainly. And some people just don't speak or articulate, especially younger folks. They kind of, as I stutter, they don't have the communication skills that some other folks might. So you really have to get it out of them. So we're using a lot of other tricks and body language to determine where they're going, and then maybe you make a suggestion. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's it."
Right.
So it's the biggest thing is with the hardware. That's where it starts off with. What exactly do they want? What type of gun?
You used a word that I've been I want to make sure that I remember this, and you used a word that I think is very unusual in the self-defense world, but I think it's really appropriate in that this is an intimate sort of thing, because it goes to their sort of their very existence. And I don't want to use the word selfish, but it's sort of the ultimate me thing, that I'm going to protect my life. And I never really thought about that as being an intimate concept, but it is.
Well, yes, especially when people are trying to determine their own level of competency. Our children look at us and they see Superman. That's what they see when they see dad. At least that's what we hope they see. But in reality, we're not Superman, and we know that, and we know where we're frail, and we know where we maybe have shortcomings. And when it comes to being the provider and the protector, and then when you realize maybe the gun that you have, you can't operate it efficiently, and you're seeing right away that there's a problem there. And is it the hardware? Is it me? And then we all, we all inherently doubt ourselves from time to time. That's just kind of human nature. So yeah, the intimacy part of it really is there. I believe. It's not like a loving intimacy, but it's
Right.
still very, very, very personal.
Very personal. Do you see this very often anymore? I know I used to see it occasionally. I haven't seen it in a long time, but do you still occasionally get the person who says, "I want the gun, but I don't want to shoot anybody. I just want to scare them off"?
Yeah, I don't see that nearly as much as years and years. The whole warning shot concept.
Right.
I think folks that, now we have so many good things to look at on the internet. Certainly there are some bad things to look at, but even going back 10 years ago when everything was in chat rooms, you had your chat rooms or your forums, that type of thing. You couldn't get a lot of information very quickly. And most folks do a little bit of vetting before they come to me. And, they find PDN or they find other resources. And it's pretty much a company line that type of firearm usage is certainly not going to be a good idea for them. So I've not seen that much recently.
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad you went with that the direction I wanted to go. That maybe all this information that everybody's putting out is maybe starting to have an effect, because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this was a really common thing. I mean, it happened all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got those people who have, of course, we talked about the idea of having a fear of the gun. Are you seeing a lot of new people come in who have been philosophically or politically opposed to a firearm, and now understanding that it is a viable tool to keep themselves safe? Are we seeing more of that?
Definitely. I can think of two individuals in the last, well, maybe close to the last year that I know, after getting to know them, were very, very anti-gun, a couple years ago. And each of them had some kind of traumatic event happen, and they learned very quickly that, the police weren't there in seconds, and it took them a long time to get there. And then they realized that they needed to take steps in their own life to become their own first responder. And one of those people, like I had mentioned before, they tried to go every route aside from the gun, with pepper spray and things like that. And that's better than nothing. A rape whistle is much better than nothing, but you're still probably going to get raped if that's all you have. The chance of that happening is much likelier. So, yeah, I've seen that. But people are coming around. I mean, you look at how many carry permits are out there. They're just every year more and more and more. If you look at the data on that, I guess like after Sandy Hook, or not Sandy Hook, excuse me, but after Katrina, you saw a big bump after 9/11. That's actually when I got involved in becoming my family's first responder with a firearm. I've been a shooter my whole life, but that's when I really took it to heart that I needed to, be there for my wife and I at the time. But after Katrina, people they saw on the TV what was going on. It's like, where are the cops? Well, they're dealing with their own problems, and these folks are just kind of on their own. And yeah, the carry permits are up, and we see, and actually I've seen a lot more females and elderly females come take classes, which is an interesting change in the demographic over the last few years too.
So let's talk about that part of the beginners arena, for those people who have made the decision, and it might have been a difficult decision for them, but they have made the decision that they want a firearm, but they don't know what yet. They maybe even haven't decided whether this is going to be for home defense or for carry, or whether they want a long gun or a handgun or what. Um, where do we start with these? What's the decision making process that they need to go through to get to the point where I want a gun and ultimately deciding, okay, I need this model?
Well, I really like Rob's plausibility principle. And that's where I'll start, and we'll talk about their daily lives, and where do you feel that you need the firearm most of all? Do you need it in your car driving to work, or do you need it at home when you're sleeping? And that will help kind of set things up and give us a direction to look at. If they have children, I would usually recommend against a long gun right off the bat, because you want to have that other hand free, perhaps. That's one of the benefits of a handgun in a home defense situation. At least, we can certainly take advantage of using that other hand to hold children back or protect, push doors, whatever, push the door shut as we barricade ourselves in our environment. So it depends on where they live too. If you have someone that lives in a row house, like here in Western Pennsylvania, we have lots of little coal towns, and the company town, that was built by the coal mining company. These houses are about 3 inches next to one another. They're close, and they're made of clapboard. And if I shot a 22 in one house, it could potentially go into 3 houses. I mean, these walls are not made of block. It's so over penetration is a huge consideration. In that case, it's like shotgun probably would not be a good choice here. And most long guns, unless you're really going to look at maybe an AR where you really get specific ammunition, for your environment, that's probably not going to be your best bet. So, those are factors too that need to be considered. Most folks they start off, that I've found, they start off wanting to have the firearm in the home. They maybe ultimately want to carry the gun, but a lot of people aren't right away are not comfortable with having a loaded firearm on their person. So usually they're looking at a home gun first, and then budget will dictate whether or not they strictly go home gun and maybe get a secondary gun for conceal, or are we considering one gun that could potentially fit both applications? If they're having a designated home gun, then a full size whatever might work just fine for them. But if they're going to conceal it, then there are those other considerations as far as, the size and the weight and the width of the firearm, how concealable to be. And depending on what they wear every day too, there's so much that goes into that choice as well.
When in this process do you have the discussion about safe storage, and what do you tell them?
Oh, I've this discussion with safe storage. Like, that's one of the first things I'll talk about, even if they don't have the gun, because they're ultimately going to have to put it somewhere. And that's one of the things I like to say. I'm sure I stole this from another instructor, but the gun is always somewhere. And if it's not on our body and our direct control, then, we have to have it secured. And a lot of times people just think of that in the context of children. You'll get people that, well, I don't have any kids, is what they say. And it's like, well, do you leave during the daytime? Well, yeah. Well, then what about that bad guy that could potentially break in your house when you're not there and then steal that firearm and then use it on somebody else? Or, I always say, what about your crazy brother-in-law, Chet? So hopefully I don't offend anyone named Chet out there. But I'm thinking of the guy from Weird Science, if you guys remember that movie. But, you have your crazy brother-in-law. Well, we don't want him touching the guns either. And it's important that people realize that. Then that gets into the whole, are we storing, are we staging? And then if I need to get a hold of that firearm very quickly, then we have to consider how efficient it is to get that safe open, or that gun box open, or up off of the shelf, or wherever you're going to keep it. So that too then depends on exactly what firearm we have. Because if they're going to be using a long gun, well, then that's probably going to be a much different storage device than if they, have a Glock 19. So there's a lot of variables, and people oftentimes get could potentially get real overwhelmed. I'm sure I overwhelmed a lot of the first couple people I started training with, because I kept saying, well, what about this? What about this? And people that aren't shooters, that haven't had enough exposure to different firearm types, they get overwhelmed because they don't have the experience to draw from and make a good decision. So sometimes a brand new person really honestly maybe can't make that decision yet. maybe they can use logic, but how can they be logical about something where they have no experiential training with, or at least exposure to? So once I find out what their goals are, I try to expose them with as many guns as I can get my hands on, especially if they haven't purchased one yet. And that's another thing that we'll talk about in a bit, I think. But I'll get as many guns in their hands as I can, try and find something they're more comfortable with, find something that's going to fit them, and then we discuss, okay, specifically what do we want to do, and then that will help dictate the storage solution there as well. But conceptually, people generally don't consider that they have to get into a safe like this at 3 a.m. with no glasses while the kids are screaming. That's probably not going to work out well for them. So the concept of a quick access safe is something that people don't think of. They think of putting a steel vault safe with the combination lock on it in their walk-in closet in their bedroom. So there's a lot of I don't know if it's misinformation or disinformation or just misconception, but a lot of times people don't think of that aspect of it.
At some point in this discussion with them, and perhaps it comes up in the discussion about access, somewhere in this discussion, and maybe it occurs before this point, do you have the discussion with them about how, I hesitate to use this word, but how dynamic and fast and scary and unorganized and chaotic a defensive shooting is? Does this become part of that discussion?
I've always kind of held off on that aspect of it till I got them to where they were kind of comfortable with a firearm, a particular type of firearm. Now, some people already know that coming in, and that's why they come in, because something happened to a loved one, or, their cousin had someone break into their house, or they had some type of traumatic event themselves. Perhaps they were involved in a dynamic critical incident and walked away from it. But I have found, again, early on, I would hit them with all this information, and I think I may have scared some people out of it to where they thought, gee, I can never do this. And they kind of roll over a bit. So I like to get them to a level of comfort and competency with whatever firearm we end up working with. And then as we start developing skill, then I'll introduce, well, okay, let's take a look at what this can really be like. And I'll give them that information, so we set a goal for them to reach. Of course, setting a goal with something as open-ended as a dynamic critical incident is not always the most accurate type of goal to have, but at least they're getting an idea of that they need to be much faster than what they are, and they need to be using as a lot less brain power when manipulating the firearm because of all the other considerations that they might have to consider in the moment, and then introducing them to the potential physiological changes under stress that they may incur. It really pushes the point that they need to know that gun inside and out, so they don't have to think about the gun aspect of it. They're going to have to worry about all the environmentals that are going on during the DCI. So to answer your question, I try to hold off on that a little bit till we get some level of competency with the firearm just as a shooting device.
That's a very, I think, very enlightened way of looking at it. And I agree. I think a lot of people probably get sort of scared off when you start talking about blood spurting from arteries, right?
Yeah.
I think that may frighten a lot of people. You talked about the situations where you would recommend a handgun for home defense, and you talked specifically about children. Are there situations, and have you had situations where you've recommended, a shotgun or a rifle for home defense, and under what kind of conditions?
Shotgun, I had an individual who, and we shot a whole bunch of guns. He had, it wasn't polio, but he had some type of condition as a child, and one of his arms really wasn't working like my arm does. And he had a hard time getting a two-handed grip. Getting the full extension was nearly impossible. Holding on to a long gun like an AR was difficult, but we found, like a Mossberg 500. I forget which model it was, but it had a strap on the slide, and he was able to kind of put his arm through it, and he could shoulder it enough to where he was pretty decent with it. So in that case, we decided to go shotgun because that's what he was most comfortable working with. He felt confident that he could cycle the action. He felt confident that he could load it. He felt confident he could point it well. And he happened to live in one of those little row houses in a coal mining town. So we really looked at different frangible options for his ammunition. And I believe that's what he's using now as his tool of self-defense at home. But that's the only time I can say that I ended up wholly recommending a shotgun for a home defense situation. Yeah, mostly I go handgun with that type of thing, just because of the options it gives us by being able to employ it while still having that other hand to do other things. Granted, we're best off getting two hands on there and getting our arms to full extension, certainly, but it's nice to have the option to be able to hold a flashlight or hold the child back or hold the phone call. We always tell people in the home, especially, get 911 on the phone as quick as we can. Once we've, armed ourselves and secured ourselves in our safe area, barricaded ourselves. And if you have a long gun, it's really hard to put that phone on your shoulder like this. I suppose you can put it on speakerphone, which is an option. But frankly, speaking for myself, I have a hard time putting mine on speakerphone when I'm not being attacked, let alone when I'm potentially being attacked and having to wield an AR or a long gun.
In this process, do you ever have the discussion about layering their security? For instance, talking about lighting and about reinforced doors and maybe dogs or alarms and things like that serve to put some insulation between them and the bad guy. Do you ever talk about the use of the firearm in terms of a piece of that total protection puzzle?
Oh, absolutely. I teach as much avoidance of conflict, but as much avoidance of using the firearm as possible. I think people need to realize the big picture as far as, their potential damages they have to deal with after they survive that dynamic critical incident, all the potential legal crap that they're going to have to go through. And frankly, if we don't have to point a gun at someone, then let's not do that. It's, I always tell people, my company's Trigger Pressers Union. I say, if I press trigger, my life changes. And I really don't want to change my life. Life's good. Things are going well. We got a good thing going on here for my family, as many people do. And right, wrong, or otherwise, survive or not, I press trigger, my life changes. So if we have that infrastructure in place, hardened doors, security cameras, security alarms, dogs, having a safe area on a second floor or in the back of the house, all of that's going to help us maybe not have to use the firearm at all, which is a much better scenario for us. I think any reasonable person is going to agree with that. Not only is it a good idea to reinforce the home and put that infrastructure in place to potentially make it so that the bad guy has a harder time to get to you, but that kind of stuff buys you time. Most people don't set their alarms at night. They only set it when they go home. You'd be surprised how many people, when you ask them in class, how many people have alarms? And everyone raises their hands and say, when do you set them? Well, when we leave. Do you set them at home when you're sleeping? And so many people don't. And many people don't even think to do that, which is kind of interesting. So, if you set that alarm so it goes beep, 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 beep as soon as someone breaches a door or breaks a window, well, is that going to deter a bad guy? It very well might. But even if it didn't, that beep, beep, beep is going to give you a couple extra seconds to get your plan in place. So I think that kind of stuff is crucial. And if we're seriously going to, employ a tool of self-defense for our family, then we need to consider that all of that infrastructure that goes in place with it.
Wow. I hadn't even thought about the notion about not having the alarm on when you're home. To me, that's just almost a no-brainer. But again, we get back to this idea: if you're not living the self-reliant lifestyle, the defensive lifestyle, these are things you don't think about, which
Right.
is why we're talking about it tonight. I want to take just a second here in the middle of the discussion to talk about, because of course we're here on Personal Defense Network, and I need to talk for a minute about Personal Defense Network's premium membership. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a minute and do that. Now, if you're watching the show tonight here on the Personal Defense Network site, and I certainly hope you are, you're probably familiar with all of the great free information that we have here on Personal Defense Network on the public side. Clint has written a couple of articles that are on the member or on the public side of Personal Defense Network. Of course, Training Talk is on the public side. Rob Pincus's monthly live broadcasts are on the public side of Personal Defense Network. But we have another side, and that's premium membership here at Personal Defense Network. And that's where you'll find all of the DVD length videos. Can I even talk about DVDs anymore? Are those so gone that I shouldn't even talk about them? I don't know. But DVD length videos, instructional videos on all kinds of topics, video collections, which are curated, small curated libraries on very specific topics from some of the best and most well-known people in the training business, in the self-defense business. Lots of superb information, lots of classes that you can take. We've got online classes here at Personal Defense Network. Maybe you didn't know that, but we do. And we've got a bunch out already, turning out more all the time. And all of this stuff is available from the membership side of Personal Defense Network. And you're probably wondering, well, how do I get membership? Well, it's real simple. All over the site, you can find links to click on to get premium membership at Personal Defense Network. And it's usually $39.95 a year. And trust me, it's worth every penny of that. But maybe you just want to try it out and see if it's for you. Well, I'll tell you what, how about if you could get premium membership for $10 for your first year? And this is full membership. It's not like metered or limited or restricted or anything like that. It's full membership for your first year for only $10. Well, how do you get that? Well, sign up for a premium membership. And when you get to the checkout, there will be a little box at checkout, and it says coupon code or discount code. I don't remember which it says, but it'll say something like that. And you just put in this code, Grant10, Grant, the number 1, the number 0, all one word. And put that in, and you'll get your first year of premium membership for only $10. Get in, look at all the great videos, all the great video collections. Take a look at some of the classes we're offering, all of the superb information. And believe me, there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of video alone on the premium membership side here at Personal Defense Network. There's just tons of stuff. And trust me, I don't think you could see it all if you try, because I haven't seen it all. And I've tried. Anyway, again, Grant10, Grant, the number 1, the number 0, all one word. Put that in at checkout, and you get your first year premium membership here at Personal Defense Network for only $10. So such a deal I have for you. Anyhow, so back to our discussion with Clint Macro, and we're talking about people who are new to the idea of defensive shooting and the idea of self-defense. And we were talking about gun choices and we've talked about safe storage, all this kind of thing. And we talked a little bit about layering your security so that the gun is not the only thing that you have standing between you and the bad guy. We talked about alarm systems, and we were just before the break, we were talking about how people don't set their alarms when they're home at night. It's really funny, because the reason I put in an alarm system wasn't for when I was gone. It was for when I was home and asleep. That's, why I put one in. So this is kind of a new concept that people don't do that.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Apparently. All right. So, the person is, after all this, has perhaps come to the decision that, yeah, okay, I need, I want a personal defense firearm. I'm committed to storing it safely. I'm committed to making it a part of my total defense. Now the question becomes, how do I learn to use it? And
Mhm.
and again, we go back to my inspiration for this episode, which is this guy making this crazy video for his daughter and her new husband. Um, there are, I mean, there are a lot of people who say, well, my brother was in the military, or my uncle was a cop, or something like that. Isn't that enough? Can't they teach me what I need to know? And so I'm sure you've gotten that question. How do you respond?
Well, we need, if we're going to take on the responsibility of becoming our family's first responder, let's take that same analogy to people that are first responders in public service. Okay, if you're if you're a police officer, or if you're a paramedic, just listening to your brother-in-law, would that be enough to qualify you to be a paramedic or a law enforcement officer? Now, I'm not saying comparing like me to a law enforcement officer or a paramedic, but they have a great deal of responsibility, as I have a responsibility to my family. So therefore, wouldn't you want to get as much education as possible, as much training as possible? So I generally won't say anything against the brother-in-law or the cousin, because they may very well get some really great information there, but they need to develop skill. So hearing something from me, even me, someone takes a class with me, they're not going to develop skills in a one-day class. Hopefully they will develop the knowledge of that skill so that they can go on and continue training and build those skills, and then develop other ones. So I try to set things up kind of in that way, and challenge them to, or entice them, depending on the individual. You talk to people how you feel that's going to work best for them, but try to get them to experience training with me or one of the guys I work with, and then get them to adopt a training lifestyle as well. I always tell people, I said, here, take
Oh,
this certificate and put it in a binder. And you put that in a binder, and then you take an agenda from another class and put it in a binder. And you see a seminar, write down that you went to seminar and put the guy's name on it that was given the seminar, put it in a binder, because we like to collect things. So I like to collect my proof of training, and people start collecting proof of training, and then they want more. And then once they get more, and they get to see expertise from different people, or at least experience their, the expertise of the instructors they're talking to, they start to kind of develop their own thought process on what exactly they feel they need to focus on. And, until they think about that, they're not going to be able to probably come up with their own idea. As far as, what direction do I go? Am I gonna strictly look at home defense strategies, or am I gonna look out in the world? Am I gonna think that I should aggressively do things, or should I think defensively? And people oftentimes get the aggressive mindset talking to law enforcement and military, because those guys train in that venue. So I like coming at things, people, right off the bat. The last thing I want you to do is to use your firearm in real life. We're going to train with it and get you as good with it as you can, but let's try our very best not to use that gun at all. And that's kind of a different, well, I don't know if it's different, but people are surprised by that. So we try to open their minds up.
At this point, when you've got this new student who is entering the training world, they're trying to decide what they're going to do. What is the most common question that they ask? Is it about the training itself? Is it about the appropriate use of force? Is it about the legalities? What sort of information are they really interested in?
Most new people, it revolves around the hardware to start with. Is the hardware that their brother-in-law gave them, or their husband that passed, that they have now this revolver that was once their husband's and now she has it. Are they going to be able to use it? Is it something that they can actually employ and implement? That's what I hear mostly. Or or what's the best thing for me? You know, what's the best gun for me to have? And it's that's a tough question. I need to learn more. I need more information. Uh, that's what I hear more often than not. And once they start developing skill and get acclimated to the mindset of a personal defense strategy, then they realize, oh, wait, there's much more to this. Most of the time I'll start working with someone and I'll just work on guns with them first, but I'll invite them to come to like a legal seminar or something that's going on. And I host them, and I work with a few other organizations that do just law seminars. They don't do anything guns, but they talk about use of force and legality of use of force in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I'll invite them out to come sit through one of those. So then they start to get into that mindset, and then that opens their minds up to other concepts. And then I try to customize the training with the gun, or at least push the training to the gun to that, more of a practical application, which then will in turn lead to the bigger picture stuff like the conflict avoidance and the situational awareness and the reason to have multi-layers of security in a house, so that we can ultimately not use the firearm. But mostly, to answer your question, it revolves around the hardware. That's where most people have their hangups or their concerns or their focus to begin with, unless there's someone that has been through a traumatic event and that was the reason that led them to me. And then you may have different things there.
Speaking of the hardware, are the beginners, are they generally aware that there is specialized self-defense ammunition? Does this ever come as a surprise to them?
Oh, sure. They well, a lot of them will, they'll realize, or they'll read, the military uses FMJs, full metal jackets. So they think then if the military uses it, then so should I. And they don't understand the overpenetration concept of FMJs. And, the same thing may apply too, where they'll say, oh, I think 9mm is a horrible choice because, my brother-in-law who was in Afghanistan was telling us stories about how they shot this guy so many times and he kept coming at him. And well, those are FMJs. They're designed to make clean holes that go all the way through. You're probably not going to have the same result with proper defensive ammunition, like, with a bonded jacket at hollow point, something like that. So, yeah, people are generally surprised by that. But then other times people will do some homework and then they're just completely overwhelmed because they don't know what they're looking for. And there's so many different brands and so many different types and different weights. And they're being overwhelmed makes them not want to make a choice because they don't want to make the wrong choice. So they kind of just don't choose. And that's where I have to help guide them to what's going to work best for them.
The paralysis that comes from a surplus of choice is a common refrain, not just in the defensive world. A lot of people do, particularly when they're entering into a new area, and particularly where we don't think of ammunition as technical. And this is an argument I get into with a lot of what I call the tactical hobbyists, because to them, well, we all know about all these calibers, we know about these bullet construction and all this sort of thing, but to the new person, this is all, it's like, first of all, it's Greek, and second of all, it's Greek mixed with Chinese sometimes, because nothing is consistent, and you have millimeters, you have inches, and sometimes the inches aren't all the same, and all this kind of stuff. And I think sometimes we forget how incredibly confusing and overwhelming that can be to a new person, don't we?
Oh, it's confusing to me, and I'm sometimes, there's a lot of choices. And the millennial types, the younger people, they'll research and research and research. And I mean, they just sit on their phones and they'll look everything up. You'll talk to them about something, they'll look up 4 articles on it while you're talking to them. They get overwhelmed by all the different information. Then you have, say, the 60 plus females that come to classes, and I see more and more of that demographic coming, and they either have no idea about different types of ammunition, or all they have is what was in the drawer with the pistol that was there when they took it, that was left by their husband, or what their husband gave them, said, here, honey, you shoot this. So they really don't know of anything else other than that, or they're completely surprised that there are other options. But mostly it's, can I run the gun? That's the biggest thing. You know, they go into the store, and especially with females, the guy at the counter says, here, honey, you want this double action snubby because you can't rack a slide. And we've all heard stories like that. But then they show up and they can't press the trigger on it. You know, the double action trigger is so hard. They actually have a much harder time at pressing trigger on it. Yeah, we're dealing with this information. We're also dealing with, sometimes that's just what they have too. You know, in another organization I work with, we always say, rock what you brung. You know, whatever you bring, we'll do our best to make you, you know, as efficient with it as we can. And there is a lot of that too, especially in, you know, in depressed areas where people just don't have any money. You know, it's all well and good for me to ultimately say, look, this is a bad choice for you, this firearm. And, you know, if someone's throwing down $1,200 on a Kimber, I can say that because they had the money to buy the Kimber. But if it's a little old lady that has an old GI 1911 that was her husband's war prize, that's all she has, and, you know, she's barely keeping her lights on, well, then for me to say you should get rid of that and go buy something else might not be the best advice I can give her. So then you're just kind of having to see what we can do to get them to use what they have. And then perhaps as they take training and as they make it more of a lifestyle choice, they'll see the need to maybe divert some funds or resources towards picking another device. Or at the very least, we'll get them to some level of competency with that particular firearm to where at least they feel better about employing it if they need to.
Right. We've got just a couple of minutes, maybe a minute and a half here, very, very quickly. Are people asking you about self-defense insurance these days? Because there are lots of different kinds of plans and stuff out there. Are people asking about self-defense insurance, and what do you usually tell them?
Oh, absolutely. People are asking all the time. And there are quite a few good options out there for them. And, you know, there are many different organizations like the USCCA specifically, I'm a huge fan of. I do a lot of work with them in their training department. There's also another company called US Law Shield, which is a Texas Law Shield. I do work with them too. They do those legal seminars here in Pennsylvania. Of course, NRA just came out with Carry Guard. I really don't know much about that particular program, but there are choices out there, and it's a free market. So I tell people, look, you really need to look at this stuff and decide what's going to work best for you, and make a choice and be happy about your choice. You know, that's really what I tell them. But I think that aspect of it, of the infrastructure, they really should consider having that legal backing. And I tell folks, even if you're not going to do that, find a criminal defense attorney that's pro-gun and beg them for their cell phone number that you can put it in your wallet next to your permit so that you have that, because you don't want to be leafing through a phone book at 3 a.m. in a jail cell somewhere. And that's part of the reality of, you know, the potential reality of using a firearm to defend yourself. So yes, I totally believe that people should look into some type of insurance or insurance-backed membership benefit, you know, from whatever organization they look at and sign up, because I think that's just smart business.
Okay.
USCCA specifically, their magazine is the magazine that they produce, I think, is worth the price of admission anyhow, let alone their quality service and their product as well. So
great.
That's my answer to that one.
Okay. So very quickly, tell us how people can get in touch with you, and remind us the name of your company and what you do and where you go and all that kind of thing.
Well, it's Trigger Pressers Union. And, you know, no matter what your ultimate want and need or desire with a firearm, we all press triggers. So I think we should unionize as trigger pressers, you know, and help fight for each other's Second Amendment rights, no matter what your chosen application of said firearm is. But triggerpressersunion.com is my website, and do lots of training here in Pennsylvania. The last year and a half, I've been doing a lot more outside of the state. My sphere of influence has been growing a bit, and NRA brought me out for their Carry Guard Expo, and I've been doing a lot of stuff with USCCA, and I've done a few things with Rob this year too, Rob Pincus, which was pretty fantastic. So you may see me in other parts of the world than just Pennsylvania. But my email address is Clint with a K, Klint at triggerpressersunion.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I also have a contact forum on my website too. So I'm very, very reachable.
Cool.
I've got a few things coming out. I got an article coming out in the new concealed carry magazine from USCCA. Should be coming out in the next issue. I think November 10th is when it comes out. I'm excited about that.
Man, I'll have to look forward to that. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on with us tonight. It's a great discussion, and I'm glad you were able to make it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to work with you, Grant. And I appreciate you giving me these opportunities to come on your show.
Well, thank you. And we'll just finish up, I guess, by reminding everybody about premium membership at Personal Defense Network. Remember the code GRANT10, GRANT, the number 1, the number 0, all one word, get you your first year of premium membership for $10. There are links on the show page that you can sign up for premium membership. Of course, links all over the site. Don't forget, whether you're a premium member or not, don't forget to sign up for the free weekly newsletter that we put out here at Personal Defense Network. And again, there are links on the show page. There are links all over the PDN site that you can sign up for the free newsletter. It keeps you abreast of all that's going on at Personal Defense Network. It's how I find out what's going on around here, because there's stuff going on all the time, and it will tell you things about like this show and when it's on and that kind of thing. So be sure to sign up for that. Join the literally hundreds of thousands of other people who are getting that newsletter every week. Speaking of this show, our next show is going to be the first Thursday in November, which I think is the 2nd. So we'll look forward to seeing you there the first Thursday of November, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here for another great show. If you need to, or if you'd like to send me an email, I like getting your emails, even the ones that complain about my hair. I like getting those. All right. So Grant at grantcunningham.com. Send me your emails. And of course, you can always reach me at www.grantcunningham.com. There you can find my teaching schedule and my books, including my latest release, which is Prepping for Life. You can find that along with links to get a copy there at my site as well. And we will sign off. We will see you next time right here on Personal Defense Network for Training Talk on November 2nd. Have a good evening, everyone, and stay safe. Bye-bye.